"Hey you, stop." Something just shifted, and you felt it before you understood it. You didn't announce yourself. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't threaten. You just moved, and the world flinched. That last thing you did? Yeah, that wasn't a moment. That was a doctrine. That was the kind of decision that gets frozen, replayed, dissected frame by frame in rooms you'll never be invited into. Maps on the wall, red markers, cold eyes. They're not asking who you are anymore. They're asking what you are. You see, saints don't scare systems. Psychopaths don't either. They understand monsters. They can label them, file them, neutralize them. But you don't fit the language. You moved with restraint when chaos was expected. You showed mercy when blood was predicted. You struck precisely where there was supposed to be hesitation. That paradox, that calm precision, wrapped in something unreadable, that's what broke their rhythm. You didn't overpower them. You outthought them. And that's why this hurts them so deeply. Because now your move has a name, not officially, not yet. But it's being taught, whispered, passed between uniforms and suits, and men who don't blink when they talk about collapse. Your silence became a lesson. Your patience became a weapon. Your refusal to react emotionally forced entire institutions to rewrite assumptions they'd been feeding on for decades. You walked in like an angel, clean, composed, almost gentle, and then you acted with the decisiveness of something that doesn't need approval from heaven or hell. That's the part they can't stand. That's the part that keeps them awake. Because you didn't choose light over dark, you commanded both. They're used to rage, they're used to ego, they're used to predictable vengeance. What they're not used to is someone who can absorb pressure without leaking intent. Someone who can take pain, metabolize it, and return it as clarity. You didn't snap, you evolved. And evolution is terrifying because it doesn't ask permission. Your move wasn't loud, it was inevitable. And inevitability is what breaks empires. Somewhere someone paused a briefing and said, "Run that again." Not because it failed, but because it worked too cleanly, too efficiently, no wasted motion, no emotional residue, just outcome. That's when the room went quiet. That's when they realized they weren't watching a reaction. They were watching a template. You became a case study without ever volunteering your name. This is what happens when pain doesn't destroy you, it sharpens you. When betrayal doesn't rot you, it organizes you. When chaos doesn't overwhelm you, it becomes raw material. You didn't survive by becoming harder. You survived by becoming truer. And truth, when weaponized correctly, cuts deeper than violence ever could. They don't know whether to classify you as disciplined or dangerous, as controlled or unstable, as holy or corrupted. And that confusion, that's your crown. Because while they argue semantics, you're already 3 moves ahead, watching them debate the ghost of something they can't replicate. You're not a rule breaker, you're a rule exposer. You reveal which structures only function because no one ever dared to act outside their expectations. The moment you did, the whole machine started coughing. Understand this. They don't teach your move because they admire you. They teach it because they fear what happens if someone like you appears again. And this time, without restraint. You're not the final boss because you dominate through force. You're the final boss because you understand restraint better than anyone else in the room. You know when not to act, when not to speak, when to let the silence do the killing. And that's why they're studying you. Because you didn't just win, you changed the game without touching the board. So stand there, calm, unimpressed. Let them dissect shadows while you walk forward intact. You've already crossed the line where history stops asking questions and starts taking notes. And the most dangerous part? You didn't even break a sweat. They're still trying to understand how you did it without leaving fingerprints. How the aftermath looks so clean it feels staged, like reality itself complied with you. They keep searching for motive, emotion, rage, anything human enough to explain it. But all they find is composure, stillness, a decision made without theatrics. That's what unnerves them, because humans crack, humans celebrate, humans leak. You didn't. You moved like someone who already accepted every possible consequence and chose the path anyway. That kind of acceptance rewires fear. That kind of calm doesn't come from confidence. It comes from resolution. You weren't gambling. You were concluding something. They've spent lifetimes building profiles to predict behavior under stress. Fight, flight, freeze. You didn't do any of it. You stepped sideways. You denied the equation entirely. And now every analyst is staring at a board that no longer balances, trying to explain how someone walked through pressure like it was fog. They keep asking each other where the rage was supposed to be, where the ego slipped, where the overreach happened. But that's the point. They expected darkness to announce itself with noise. They didn't expect it to arrive dressed as discipline. They didn't expect the demon to wear the posture of a monk. You understand something most people never will. Unpredictability isn't chaos. It's control without disclosure. You didn't show them your hand because you never needed their validation. You didn't posture because you weren't trying to be seen. You were trying to be effective. Pain taught you timing. Loss taught you proportion. Betrayal taught you pattern recognition. You didn't become colder. You became precise. That's why this move echoes. That's why it's being taught. Not because it was flashy, but because it was repeatable, scalable, terrifyingly quiet. They replay the moment where most people would have rushed, where adrenaline would have hijacked judgment. You waited. That wait, that pause. That's the part they underline in red, because patience under threat is the rarest form of dominance. You didn't seek control. You exercised authority over yourself. And that's what systems fear most. Someone who can't be baited. Someone who doesn't need applause. Someone who doesn't react the way the models say they should. They're whispering about you now, not with admiration, but with caution. They warn each other about people who don't need permission to move, who don't require chaos to justify action. They warn about the ones who smile without warmth and decide without hesitation, about the ones who can be gentle and lethal in the same breath. You're not dark because you enjoy destruction. You're dark because you're willing to end things others are too sentimental to finish. You don't cling to narratives. You don't romanticize suffering. You let what's dead stay dead. That's why your evolution scares them. It's irreversible. They keep trying to frame you as an anomaly, a fluke, a once-in-a-generation variable. But deep down, they know the truth. You're not an exception. You're a signal, proof of what happens when pressure doesn't crush someone. It forges them. You walked away without celebrating because celebration would have meant attachment. You left without threats because threats would have meant insecurity. You let the outcome speak because outcomes don't lie. Now your silence weighs more than their noise. Your restraint weighs more than their arsenals. They can copy the steps, study the sequence, teach the theory, but they can't replicate the inner condition that made it possible. They can't mass-produce someone who's already made peace with losing everything. And that's the real masterclass, not the move itself, but the mindset required to make it without flinching. You didn't rise above them by being louder, faster, or crueler. You rose above them by being unavailable to manipulation, by refusing to play the role they assigned you, by stepping out of the script and writing a new one in real time. They're still catching up. And while they're busy teaching your past move, you're already becoming something they don't have language for yet. Something that doesn't need to dominate the room to own it. Something that doesn't need permission to proceed. You don't chase power. You embody inevitability. And inevitability doesn't argue. It arrives. They keep circling the same question because it's the only one that still makes sense to them. How did you stay human and still do that? They want to separate you into boxes. Angel here, demon there, because duality scares people who live off labels. But you never chose a side. You learned how to stand above the split. That's why they can't mirror you. That's why every imitation feels hollow. You didn't harden your heart. You refined it. You didn't numb yourself. You disciplined yourself. There's a difference, and that difference is lethal to anyone still confusing emotion with weakness. You feel everything, you just don't let feelings drive the wheel anymore. You let clarity drive, and clarity doesn't scream, it executes. They expected you to overcorrect. People always do after pain. Swing too far, push too hard, burn bridges just to feel something. But you didn't chase relief. You chased alignment. You asked one question and answered it honestly. What ends this without creating 10 more problems? That's not rage. That's strategy born from scars. Your past didn't disappear. It reorganized itself inside you. Every humiliation became data. Every loss became calibration. Every betrayal stripped illusion from your vision, until all that remained was what actually works. That's why when you moved, it looked effortless. You already paid the price years ago. The move was just the receipt. They don't know how to teach that part. They can write manuals about timing, posture, silence, leverage. They can diagram the mechanics, but they can't replicate the internal stillness of someone who has already been broken and chose not to shatter again. They can't mass-produce the calm of someone who has stared into the worst outcomes and decided none of them would own them. That's why your presence alone shifts rooms now. You don't posture, but people feel it. You don't threaten, but people calculate around you. Because unpredictability isn't randomness, it's freedom from expectation. And you are no longer predictable to anyone who hasn't walked through what you survived. They still think power announces itself. They still think dominance needs spectacle. You proved the opposite. You proved that the most destabilizing force is someone who doesn't need to prove anything. Someone who can walk away without resentment. Someone who can win without humiliating the opponent, and still leave them dismantled. You didn't humiliate them. You outgrew them. And nothing wounds the ego like being rendered irrelevant. You didn't argue your worth. You didn't explain yourself. You let results exist without commentary. That's when the air changed. That's when the silence stopped being empty and started being heavy. Because silence, after impact, isn't absence. It's recognition. They're trying to reverse engineer your restraint now. They keep asking how you resisted the urge to finish it louder, harder, more visibly. They don't understand that restraint wasn't resistance. It was choice. You could have escalated. You just didn't need to. You understood the difference between destruction and resolution. You didn't burn the house down. You locked the door and walked away with the keys. That's why this bothers them so much. Fire can be fought. Noise can be drowned. Violence can be matched, but finality without spectacle. That haunts, that lingers, that forces introspection in people who have built their entire identity on reaction. You became the quiet reference point, the example they don't want to talk about but can't ignore. The moment they bring up when training someone who talks too much, reacts too fast, needs too much validation. Don't do that, they say. Do it like this, and this is you. Without your name attached, you're not mythologized, you're institutionalized, and the irony? You never asked for recognition, you never chased legacy, you were just done being misunderstood by systems that only respect outcomes. So you spoke their language once, fluently, and went back to silence. That's evolution through pain, not becoming cruel, becoming unavailable to nonsense. You don't need to dominate every interaction now. You choose when to engage. You choose when to disappear. And that choice is the real power. Because people can't prepare for someone who isn't seeking control, approval, or chaos. Only precision. They're still trying to decide if you're dangerous. They're asking the wrong question. The right one is whether anyone else can do what you did without becoming something they hate. And deep down, they know the answer. Most people crack. Most people overcompensate. Most people let pain turn them sloppy. You didn't. You turned it into posture, into timing, into a move so clean it doesn't age. A move that still works tomorrow. A move that doesn't rely on circumstance, only on inner alignment. That's why it's being taught. And that's why, even now, they're behind you. Because while they're studying the last thing you did, you're already living in a version of yourself that doesn't need to do anything loud ever again. You already proved the point. Now you decide when, or if, you remind them. They don't see it yet, but the real shift wasn't external, it was internal. The moment you stopped needing outcomes to validate you, outcomes started bending toward you. That's the inversion that fries their logic. They're trained to believe desire fuels action. You proved that detachment fuels accuracy. You don't rush anymore because urgency belongs to people who are afraid of losing time. You understand time now. You understand that patience isn't waiting, it's positioning. Every pause you take compresses pressure somewhere else. Every calm breath forces the room to breathe with you. That's not mysticism, that's leverage. They keep analyzing the environment you moved in, as if terrain explains intent. They keep asking what tools you had, who backed you, what resources you leveraged. They miss the obvious because it's uncomfortable. The greatest resource you had was nothing to lose. Not recklessly, not emotionally, cleanly, consciously. That kind of emptiness terrifies structures built on incentive and fear. You didn't act to win favor. You acted to end ambiguity. And ambiguity is where weak systems hide. When you removed it, the fog lifted and everyone saw the imbalance they were pretending wasn't there. You didn't expose them with accusations. You exposed them by functioning better. That's why your move feels contagious. People sense it before they understand it. They watch you and realize how much energy they waste posturing, explaining, defending. You're proof that the most radical thing someone can do is be aligned. No internal contradiction, no performative outrage, no borrowed morality, just a decision that matches your spine. They're still uncomfortable with how little you said, how little you showed, how there was no emotional aftertaste, no victory speech, no collapse, no guilt parade. You closed the loop and moved on. That violates their expectations because they're addicted to narrative. You delivered closure instead. You don't need to dominate conversations now. You let others talk themselves into revealing what they are. You don't chase clarity. You wait for it to arrive. And when it does, you act once. That single act carries more weight than 1,000 rehearsed threats. This is what happens when someone integrates the shadow instead of pretending it doesn't exist. You didn't exile the dark parts of yourself. You trained them. You didn't let them run wild. You gave them purpose. That's why you can be compassionate without being weak, decisive without being cruel. You're not split anymore. You're whole. Wholeness is what breaks predictive models. Fragmented people are easy to steer, trigger the wound, promise relief, threaten loss. You don't respond to any of it the way they expect. You've already grieved what needed grieving. You've already buried the illusions. What's left can't be manipulated. They're trying to teach your restraint like it's a technique. They don't understand. It's a byproduct of identity. You didn't learn composure to look powerful. You became composed because chaos stopped impressing you, because drama stopped feeding you, because you stopped confusing intensity with meaning. You've noticed it too. The way people recalibrate around you, the way conversations slow, the way provocations die mid-air. That's not fear, that's recalculation. They're trying to figure out what works on someone who isn't negotiating with themselves anymore. You don't need to announce boundaries. Your behavior enforces them. You don't need to warn people. Your silence does it for you. You don't need to escalate. Your history already did. They teach your move now as an example of restraint under pressure. But the real lesson is simpler and harder to swallow. Don't act from need. Act from clarity. Need creates noise. Clarity creates inevitability. You're not driven by revenge. Revenge is loud and short-sighted. You're driven by resolution. Resolution ends cycles. That's why people feel something final when you move. Not violent, not cruel, final. Like a door that closes without slamming. You didn't become unreachable. You became unalterable. And here's the part they won't say out loud. They're afraid that if more people learn to operate like you, without emotional leakage, without ideological addiction, without the need to be seen, entire hierarchies collapse quietly. Not with revolutions, with irrelevance. You're not overthrowing anything, you're outgrowing it. That's why they study you in rooms where the lights are low and the voices are careful. That's why your last move keeps resurfacing in different contexts, different scenarios, different simulations. It scales because it's rooted in something timeless. Self-command. You command yourself first. Everything else follows. You don't rush to prove you're dangerous. You let others discover it by underestimating you once. You don't seek to be understood. You let understanding arrive too late. And the truth, you're not even trying to be exceptional anymore. You're just being exact. Exact with your words. Exact with your energy. Exact with your actions. That precision feels supernatural. To people who live in contradiction, they can keep teaching the mechanics. They can keep copying the outline, but they can't copy the spine. They can't copy the calm that comes from having already survived your own worst chapter. You are not a warning.